I was like essentially making as much as I was making at my full-time job for that first year, and I was like, oh, okay, this will keep going forever. After that first year, the project closed. The person didn't need me for the future projects that they had. I kind of went almost to zero, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can't just quit my job. I need to figure out how to like keep things kind of flowing. No one cares, right? Like no one cares about your tool. No one knows that you exist. They don't get like a ton of views, but they supposedly charge like I think 6-7 figures to get sponsorships, because the views that they do get, right, are CEOs and people who make decisions and are highly valuable. They're so busy with clients that like, yeah, I eventually had to just focus on consulting, and I eventually left my job at Facebook. If you want change, you have to do something, right? Like if you want to start a business, you have to go out there and if it's consulting, start putting out content, start talking to people. Maybe nothing happens, and hopefully you're trying to improve as you do it, but like nothing will happen if you don't try, and no one's going to give you a consulting business. But I think the challenge is that you could be going at it for 5 years and nothing could happen. Thank you so much for having me on, Warren. My name is Ben Rogojan. People know me as the Seattle data guy. I've been working in the data world for over a decade now. I currently run a consulting company called the Seattle Data Guy. We help companies kind of find value from their data, manage their data infrastructure, set it up, and so on.
I'm super excited to have you on. I've been following you on LinkedIn and YouTube for quite a while. You're a wealth of information about data engineering and consulting and freelance work, and it's really exciting to get the chance to speak with you. So I was hoping that we could kind of discuss your career story, starting kind of around the time when you first started getting into freelancing or consulting. I know you were working at Facebook, I think, when you first got into it.
Yeah.
So I'd be really curious to like learn about like what those first projects specifically were and how you came about them, and then kind of just like go from there.
Sure. I mean, my first projects actually came prior to Facebook. The very first project, I had been working at a hospital, and turnaround finance director kind of came in and was working with our team. And while he was doing that, he just kind of brought up the fact, he's like, hey, Ben, I do consulting time. I see that you are good with data stuff. I'd love to kind of bring you on if you ever need or if you're open to the idea. And I was like, sure. And then he like went away like after he did his thing there. And I think like 6 months later, he reached out and he's like, hey, like, I've got a project. Like, can you come help? And that's honestly when I started the Seattle Data Guy. I like to tell most people that, it was really good, like from a financial standpoint, okay, this will keep going forever. And then after that first year, the project closed, and then, the person didn't need me for the future projects that they had. And so I kind of went almost to zero, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can't just quit my job. I need to figure out how to like keep things kind of flowing and keep a pipeline full and things like that. And I think that was something you wanted to ask about later, but at least that's kind of where it started.
Yeah, so you developed this whole like comprehensive marketing strategy to help you get leads, I guess, and it seems to be working very well. And you have like not only a wide reach, but you also have like a pinpointed focus reach for your ideal clients as well. So I really admire that. But starting going back to the hospital you were working at, so this other person I guess had like a consulting agency or like a boutique consulting firm, and he took you on as like a kind of like a freelancer for him, and something like that. And then I wonder like what were you working on with him? Like, were you doing data engineering? Were you building data pipelines? Like, what, or were you advising other people who were considering doing that?
Yeah, the very first project, honestly, was just helping people migrate from Microsoft Access to SQL Server. Like that was the very first project that I took on. So it wasn't, now we've got Snowflake, we've got a lot of modern tooling, but that was kind of the start. Getting people just to a place where they could answer some basic questions. I think that hasn't changed, right? Like people are often trying to make data more accessible, whether it's because the data is slow in your current system, or it's just complex, or it's just not centralized, right? Like that I don't think has changed. Maybe the tooling has changed, but the problems haven't changed that much. And in terms of marketing, I think I think it's been built up over time, right? Like it's not like I had this like massive strategy almost a decade ago and was like, oh, I'll just put out all this content and this is exactly how I'll do it. I think my goal was just to put myself out there, share content, try to make content that I thought was helpful, and see where it went, right? And since then, I think I've learned to try to target more specifically, but I don't think you have to have this perfect strategy when you first start.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of impossible to have a perfect strategy, but in hindsight, I guess you can. So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to hear what it would be.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing things change so much, so you kind of have to be a little bit of aware of like what the times are. I think in terms of like maybe not the perfect strategy, but how to get there. I think that what I usually will tell most people is when you first start out consulting. The very big thing that you need to focus on is how to land clients, right? Like that, not pricing, not all this other stuff. Obviously, that'll be important, but like that's not as important as like how do you get in front of possible customers that would want to pay you, and how do you get them to trust you. That really is the key. So I will tell most people, if you can, first spend the first little bit trying to get in front of as many people as possible that would be the right customer without trying to sell to them. That could be people that you just know already. Maybe again, you know a director that you work with. Talk to them, just understand their problems that they face day to day. If you can get other people to intro you to people, one, then you're building your network, but also two, then you're also just trying to like understand the problem that you're selling into. Because really, what you're trying to do is figure out what are the current gaps in the market. What are the
Definitely, yeah. So like finding a vehicle to speak with people who could hire you. So that could be like, um, I don't know, it could be a variety of things. It could be in-person events. It could be uh, messaging people on LinkedIn, whatever your preference is. Um, but I noticed that you specifically seem to have an affinity for marketing, and I'm curious as to why. Personally, I feel like marketing is kind of fun because
Yeah, I'm not sure, right? Like it's definitely one of those things that you're like, if you were to ask me why or what, I don't have a good answer. I think I just started doing it. I think there's the little bit of addicting component of like number go up makes me happy. I think you eventually, on the flip side, you have to start to realize that sometimes the bigger number is not best, right? Like, I think I recently saw that, what's that one podcast? It's like TPBM or something. I don't know if you've seen this, their podcast. They don't get like a ton of views, but they supposedly charge like I think 6-7 figures to get sponsorships because the views that they do get, right, are CEOs and people who make decisions and are highly valuable. And so I think you eventually start even learning there that's like, well, numbers great, but who the number is also important. Not, it's not that everyone wants to target CEOs. I think that's another important aspect is like, who are you targeting? Are you trying to set up like a intro course for people where you do a boot camp? Are you trying to do a consulting agency? Well, that's going to be a different set of people that are making buying decisions. So yeah, I think that maybe is what you're talking about in the sort of the technical part. But I think I didn't really become as interested in that until later on, until I'm like trying to get better at it or refine it more than anything else. So yeah.
well, I find for myself, like the biggest mistake I've made as I've been trying to communicate with these people who could potentially hire me is that just what you said is like the market that I'm addressing. I have not been addressed. If you're someone who wants to like get freelance data work, first of all, who should you be speaking to specifically? I'm sure there's like a host of different niches you could choose. There's like it depends a lot on your circumstances, but you probably have a general sense.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to like trying to, let's say, be your freelance data engineer, or data analyst, you're likely going to try to one figure out if there's a specific market or maybe domain you want to work in. Like, is it go to market? Is it sales? Is it healthcare? Is it something of that nature? And then from there, you're likely going to be targeting people that make decisions in that space, right? Like, it might be more at the director VP level or even maybe as high as like the C-suite. It'll be somewhat dependent on company size as well, because at a Fortune 500 company, you're probably not talking to the CMO, you're probably talking to VPs and directors. But if you're talking to a smaller organization, you're probably talking to like the CMO, right? Because that is the person who makes the decision on, hey, we want to improve your marketing. How do we do that? Well, let's use data. How do we use data to do that? So, yeah, I think all of that is kind of where it goes, and is important as you're digging into it. So I think when it comes to who you're trying to target, again, first is there a specific domain, and then second, who is the buyer? Like, who is the person that has money and has the power to make that decision? I know someone had an acronym for this, like I don't remember what it was. Shakar, I think, posted about it in the TFA, but basically there's different aspects. You need someone who's like the buyer, who can actually say yes, like the actual person who's the stakeholder, who is the actual, like, they want the problem solved. Those aren't always the same person, right? And they need to kind of be involved as well. And so you at least need those two people. And you want to probably target the stakeholder, but eventually get to the buyer, because they're going to make the buy decision. But usually you're talking to the stakeholder and like, hey, I think I have this solution, and you have a problem. So that's usually the way that I focus on it.
So I've taken a look at your personal, like your website, and I've tried to like dissect, like, all right, what is this guy's niche? And it seems like you don't really have a niche. Like, you're pretty general. So I'm wondering, like, is that something that happens later on if you have like enough of an audience? Or yeah, so like you didn't go with those problem sets in mind. You kind of like experimentally figured out that that was best for you through trial and
Yeah.
error. So like you just try a bunch of different things, and then you realize, all right, these three areas I can kind of focus on.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I think when it comes down to it, you're really just going to try a bunch of things, right? And that's kind of the whole. I think a big part of it. I think it's easy to try to get stuck in the, like, I'm going to do this one niche, and then you spend a year and a half doing it and it doesn't work. I do think there's something to be said about, like, hey, why don't you do like 3-month experiments the same way you would do kind of investing, where it's like, hey, let's invest a little in that. Did it work? No. Okay, let's try a different one. I think you see this with companies even like Databricks, and I sometimes give them a hard time, I think, for doing this, where they come up with a new term every 2 months, it feels like, or every month. But there's a reason, right? Like, for them, it's like, look, if that one doesn't work, we'll try another one. If that one doesn't work, we'll try another one. Because eventually we might like get the. I mean, I think right now I've been pretty busy, so I don't think I have any like new experiments. I think stuff around like AI foundations and things like that is something I do want to eventually dig into, but I haven't had time. It is the pros and cons of being busy, right? Like, on one side you're busy, but on the flip side, it's like, oh man, like I have all this work I want to try to get done, but I'm not getting it done. Yeah.
So you're kind of at a point where you're so busy that you don't really have time to even experiment right now.
I think I still do, but it's like, to like fully spend the time that I would in the past, and I think that's also, it's not necessarily bad, right? It means you're in a good space, but yeah.
Well, what are some experiments looking back that were very influential for you once you ran them, like a switch flipped? Are there
Yeah, I
any
don't know if
experiments that come to mind?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a specific experiment per se. I mean, I think, when the early 2020s happened, I think I was trying a lot of like, let me help you set up your data stack. Like, that was the big one, because there were a lot of companies, the modern data stack.
Yeah, it's a really good way to double down on stuff that you're seeing and
Yeah.
kind of like attract more of it to you.
Yeah.
Maybe we could go back to your career, and I think it's interesting to think, all right, like I admire a lot like where you are with your freelance business, and it'd be kind of interesting to get more details behind each stage of your business and things that were important for the steps that you took to get to where you are. So when you first started at the hospital, someone else came along with an already functioning freelance business, and they kind of like took you in and like had you for like I guess they probably paid you hourly to help them with their projects. And then you realized like, oh, like once I don't have this guy, I don't have a way to get clients. So you came up with some sort of like social media presence. You started Seattle Data Guy, and you started like trying stuff so that you could build some sort of like consistent flow of work for yourself. So maybe we could go back to that stage and then kind of continue on the journey and talk about like the important steps that you took.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, right? Like there was a point that I kind of realized I had like without the other consultant, I really had no work coming in. So yeah, so
Which
that
is
was
a
the kind of
which is a
sorry, go
tough
ahead.
feeling because like it's really impactful because I think everyone wants to feel like, hey, like I can create like an income for myself. I'm not dependent on like someone else to get me work. So that feeling, like to be able to get your own work, it's really empowering. And I think a lot of people would like to feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely is empowering once you finally do, I think, find the way that you're going to do it. And, you know, everyone has their way. And I think it's important to maybe test out a few different approaches, right? Maybe marketing isn't for you. Maybe you're just, it's not necessarily that you're not good at it. Maybe you don't like it, right? Like, there's certain things that, like, if I were to do, it's like, I just don't like it, right? Like I can try and then maybe I'm not the best at it. But also, the more you try things and the better you get at them, sometimes the more you like it too. So I wouldn't say like give up just because
Exactly.
you,
So
you
like
don't like
I
it.
can't take what you did and replicate it and have it be successful, but I can take what you did and try to work backwards and kind of understand like what was the context of his decisions? Why did he do this? Why did he do that? All right, this is my context. Now if I were to take the same kind of logic, how would I apply his decision making to my situation and what
Yeah,
decisions would should I make? So
yeah,
like we can all learn from your specific case study of your business, how the decisions you made, why you made them, and then we can take that, apply it to our own. That's the
yeah,
idea.
yeah. No, I don't know if that was a question or more of a statement.
I'm trying to like help set the context of like what I'm trying to how I'm trying to steer the conversation. Cause like I don't want you to think that we're gonna just copy you blindly.
No, no, and I think that's good advice. I think it can be tempting to copy people blindly and just do what other people do, but like you said, you can kind of look at what you're doing, what's currently going on in the world.
Yeah, and also I think like having some sort of vision as to what you're building. So like what does the end picture kind of look like? What direction are you heading in? That helps a ton. Because I know some people like there's one person I spoke with who tried freelancing and he said he looked at like McKinsey and he said like, oh, that's the direction maybe he's headed towards and he doesn't actually want to have a business like that.
Yeah,
So he pivoted. Maybe there's like a sweet spot within freelancing before you become so big like McKinsey, but maybe you're just like a single operator or have a small team and it's kind of like an awesome like little spot to be as a data pro. Um, that's so I'm curious. Maybe what's your vision? Do you see like yourself expanding to like have a huge consulting firm, or do you like where you're at? Is there kind of like a sweet spot? Do you see?
yeah. I mean, I definitely like where I'm at the very least. I think I've often thought maybe I'll expand, but I do like that. You know, um, when you have this setup of a business, you don't have to constantly be selling. You don't have to.
So like I guess like it depends on your taste, like the type of work that you enjoy doing, and then also the trade-off between like how much time you spend and how much money you make.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think
No, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so I think it's like those three factors are big for deciding kind of like the type, the size of the business that you try to build. Um, so how does yeah, so like maybe for your current situation or for like if you were to scale it to like a boutique like data business, like how do you see that those factors um, kind of like interplaying? Like what about that size business do you think would enable your ideal kind of like work schedule and
Yeah.
like the
Oh, sorry.
trade-offs?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it would be the fact that like you can hire really tightly, right? Like when you go at 100,000 person company or even 1,000 person company, right? You're gonna get lost in a lot of different ways. You can't interview everyone. Right? There's almost no way. I'm sure some people do even now, but like if you're the CEO or the person running it, you can't interview everyone. You can't talk to everyone. Projects will start to slip, right? Like it's impossible to have every project go perfectly. And even with a 50-person company, right? Like you're going to have projects not go perfectly, but especially with like 1,000-person company, things are going to go wrong. You're going to have to start probably maybe either dropping the bar or like really have to put a lot of effort into a development program, which that part could be fun. I think it would be fun to have like a program where you like upskill people to be the level that you want them to be at. And so I think that part could be fun. But yeah, you just have higher risk that, if someone gets hired that isn't what you actually want to create. So I think having 50 people would be like, I know that I probably talked to almost everyone I've ever interviewed, right? Like you're always the last person to make the call. So yeah, maybe you have to interview 50 people a year, but it's probably worth it to do that when you're hiring. And then you probably also know what is going on in most projects to some degree, at least. Maybe not perfectly, not to the nitty gritty, but you could probably say like, oh yeah, we're doing a project for this company, and here's the value we're adding. You probably have a list somewhere that you could always reflect back on. So I think that's it. You just have more insight in what's going on. You can feel like you deliver very high quality work.
Yes, that's something I didn't consider. It sounds like for you, the main factor is the level of control you can have over the business and the quality of its product or service.
Yeah, exactly.
So like if it gets too big, then you would be uncomfortable with the level of control you would have over how it runs. And then
exactly.
I guess maybe you wouldn't want to be associated with it, or it would just be too much.
Exactly.
Interesting. I never considered that actually. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way. Okay, so I mean, I still want to go back to your story because I'm not sure if you're sick of telling it, but I feel like it's nice to hear like a popular story like yours from different angles.
Sure.
Maybe like we can go into more detail that you haven't really gone into before in a specific area, or just like to try to like enrich the story more. But anyways, so where we left off, I think, is you're at the hospital and you had projects that were given to you, fed to you from a friend or a coworker that you met, and then going from there. I'm curious, like what happened next?
Yeah, I mean, so then obviously the project ended. I think I had like a light project or two from another friend after that, but it was pretty small in comparison. And then I really honestly just started putting out content. I think I started writing on Medium pretty heavily. And that was like one major area that I started spending time.
So were you doing like one post a week on Medium or something?
It might have been like something close to that, maybe one or two a month, or sorry, 2 or 3 a month or something like that.
And at this point, was it just like what you were learning about? Was it like tools that you were studying, or kind of like how did your content look back then and your mindset?
Yeah, definitely like stuff around like what I was learning about. Like I wrote about like boosting and bagging algorithms and like how to do that and things like whatever I was learning or doing like frequently was kind of what I would spend a lot of time writing.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. So I think that's a good mindset to have, because like if you write about what you're learning, then you can kind of learn better, and you can also kind of just like use your learning as content. But then if what you're learning about isn't like what your ideal customer wants to hear about, then there could be a mismatch there. I guess ideally it would be aligned, or whoever it is that you want to work with will like what you're learning about.
Yeah. I mean, you never know, and I think you don't have to find the perfect content immediately, right? Like I think that's a big part of this as well. Is you don't need to find the exact content you want, or the exact content that speaks to your ICP, your target audience, right? Like it's okay if you spend some time looking and searching, and I that's why I say, like, do little experiments. Take some time. Don't feel like you have to answer everything immediately perfectly. Yeah,
Yeah, so be okay with uncertainty. And one of the
yeah,
first experiments that you took was like one post a week on Medium about what you're learning.
yeah.
So, what's next?
Uh, let's see. I mean, I think I was also writing stuff for my blog as well. Where else I wrote if I did, because I didn't do videos until 2022, I want to say, so that was a little later. Um, but yeah, it was a lot of writing, honestly, just a lot of writing. And then actually, I had some people even ask if I could write for their companies at that point. So I was like, well, sure, fine. Like, if you'll pay me a little money, I'll try this out too. And so I was trying that out, and yeah, it was a lot of different like experiments just there. Like, I think I was very much in a like yes phase kind of moment, right? Like, I think there's points in your life where you say no, and then there are points in your life where you're like, okay, I just got to say yes and see where this goes. So I think that that's a big part of things, is like figuring out where you are at. Is it a yes? Is it a no phase? Because eventually you're going to be too busy and you have to start saying no to everything. But initially you can start saying yes to everything and saying like, okay, I got time, might as well try this. Like, I think sometimes we're worried about the cost. It's like, oh, well, this won't get me the thing that I want. But if you're doing nothing anyways, like, well, might as well try if nothing is working at this point. Give it a try with something, and then maybe it'll work, and you can kind of figure it out from there.
Definitely, yeah. If you're in a yes phase, you better be saying a lot of yeses, uh, and not be so, I guess, picky.
Yeah.
Uh, but as you go on, you become more and more selective as you clarify your direction. Um, but so how did the technical writing go? Was it like technical writing about tools and like how to use them or their features that you did?
Yes. Sometimes tools, sometimes just more generic things. I think I'll also often tell people this, and this goes both for consultants and for vendors as well, right? Your target audience is not going to Google your solution, right? Like, they're not going to Google, oh, do I need tool A? How do I use tool A? Especially if you're a newer tool, no one cares, right? Like, no one cares about your tool. No one knows that you exist. And talk about more broad things, focus on um, what are the generic problems that people have? How do I find value from data? That's super generic, but something like that. Like, how do I detect fraud in healthcare? Think more broadly, think more thought leadership level, and then eventually maybe you'll become popular enough to where people will care about exactly who you are. But initially, you kind of got to start broad, and when you're writing content, think about your user, think about what they are going to be Googling, I guess now chat GPTing, and looking up information for there, and put content there.
So it kind of stands out to me that you actually ended up kind of specializing within like a few tools that you help people like work with, and
Yeah.
you kind of started out back then like writing for a few different like tools about like how to use them and their features and stuff. So it kind of ended up being exactly what you've focused on going forward. I guess you like wrote for a variety of different tools, and then over time you refined like your preferred tools, and then you kept like helping people use them, and something like that, which is kind of something like an angle that a lot I wouldn't have really thought about. So let's talk about tools. Like, what categories of tools are important to focus on? When we say tools, I'm thinking of like software, like data platforms. Uh, so like if you look at the tools that you work with, like could you categorize them so that someone might say, oh, like these are the
Yeah.
categories of tools. I
Sure.
want to kind of like think about this category of tools, or I want to make sure I have one tool within each category.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like, I do try to stay pretty vendor agnostic overall. Like, there are tools that I've just found lead to clients because, in terms of like why, I think there are tools that often have at least some technical heavy lifting, or at least some technical, like, people are going to get confused by them. So there's that aspect of it. I think Snowflake and Airflow are good examples. They also have to be decently popular, right? You don't want to go out and pick a tool that no one is using and talking about that, because no one's Googling it. It goes back to like people have to search for it. Airflow is kind of one that I've used a lot, and then also because I've used it a lot, like I know a lot of the problems, and I know a lot about it, and so that's been helpful. And so, look for tools that have some technical requirement that isn't just, hey, I could pick this up myself. I think for a while there, I think like at this point, 3 years ago, I was saying like, hey, you all should look into Databricks. I think there's some videos somewhere, probably more of my lesser viewed ones, but they're somewhere on my consulting content where people would ask me like, what tool should I pick? And I reference Databricks because it's like Databricks is arguably technically more complex than Snowflake. And so people are going to need it. And especially, it happened to be that, then AI also started becoming very popular. So it grew even more. But it was like, you got to find those tools that are popular enough and have a technical lift to them that require your skill set. At least if you go the tool route. You can also obviously go the like, I'm a fraud detection specialist. I'm great at go-to-market engineering, or like delivering value via go-to-market metrics and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of the way I think about it.
So, I mean, like, how does like a client who finds you, like, how do they, I'm assuming like it's someone who doesn't really know how to use the tool themselves, but somehow they know they want the tool. Like, how does that work? Because like, why would you be looking into these tools if you're not kind of a technical person already?
Well, in many cases, they're trying to buy a tool, right? There are some people who've already like had a tool maybe handed down to them from leadership, and so now they have to pick and use this tool. In some cases, it's because they're trying to figure out the right tool. I think a lot of people, even less technical people, are trying to find the right tool. And so if you provide content that helps bridge that gap, especially for less technical people, and they find your content and feel like, hey, this person helped bridge the gap, they're going to probably be interested in kind of being like, oh, cool, like let's see if they can help me even further bridge this gap. So even people who are maybe less technical kind of have a general idea, right? Like a lot of people go to conferences. I mean, you'll hear this all the time where people are like, oh, someone went to a conference, our CFO went to a conference, now we've got Palantir. It's like, I didn't want it, now I have it. So you never know. I've had plenty of people, everyone from doctors to directors, some technical, some less technical, CEOs, reach out to me because of my content.
That's interesting. So I think like a pretty good strategy, like an improved strategy, rather than saying, I'm going to write about data in general, saying I'm going to write about a few different tools that I think might be tools that people want to learn how to use or have implemented in their business, and like choose maybe like 2 or 3 tools, and then maybe just start iterating from there.
Yeah, no, I think that's not a bad way to do it. Again, also you can pick problem sets. Like it can be tools, it can be problem sets. Don't feel like you have to pick one specifically. There's so many different ways.
So I think for a technical person, unless you for some reason have a large amount of like background in a certain area, like you were a sales rep for 20 years or something, I think you're going to be like, it's going to be quicker for you to pick up a tool and gain like a relative advantage over anyone else who wants to use the tool than it would be for you to learn to gain domain expertise.
Sure. No, yeah, sure. Of course.
So that's why I think it's appealing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I think that is appealing. I just don't think you should limit it to just that. Like if you have that domain experience, that's a huge value add.
From your experience or from what you've seen, what domains are most interesting to you? Like if you had to choose a domain, which one would you choose? Or
I mean, I always like healthcare. Healthcare is always a great space. It's very real. I think anything that's more tangible and feels more like less like just selling widgets or ads is always interesting. So anything like the mining or things of that nature, they don't always pay as well, but those are always interesting because again, it's just real things, real. Maybe it's the something else like the little boy in me that also likes that idea too. But yeah, those are always interesting spaces.
mining is a very interesting one. I've never heard of anyone mention that within like a data freelance career context.
Yeah, I
Have
mean, there's
you?
mining, there's oil and gas, there's a lot of like interesting spaces out there that are like, oh yeah, of course they have data too, and they have massive amounts of data. I had Jessica. She works at, I forget the company name, but like she's done a few good talks about like kind of her experience in like petroleum engineering and how she's used data science and that to like drill wells and do that kind of thing where it's like, oh, that's so real, that's so tangible. It's not like, hey, let me make this product more addictive so people keep clicking on it kind of thinking. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool kind of glance into a completely different industry that is very much responsible for how the world works. So it would be interesting to learn more about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, going back to your story then, I still don't know what happens after you started. So, like, you got your first project, few projects with your coworker. Then you started posting on Medium, and you started posting about like writing content for software companies, like tools. So you started learning about like all the different tools within the data industry. And I guess that was actually really important for you and your direction because you ended up specializing in a few of these tools and offering like data migrations and helping clients use these tools. Um, so I'm curious, like, what next after you started writing for these different tools and you were writing on Medium and you had like your personal blog and yeah. So
Yeah. I mean, oh, good.
sorry. So I guess like at that point you were starting to get like a flow of leads. Like your hypothesis was like, all right, if I start writing about this stuff, then like some people will start reaching out to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think I started getting like a slow trickle of leads here and there, and it was just like one-off projects. At a certain point, I got a job at Facebook, and so I was working there, and so I was kind of balancing a few things at that point. Yeah, I mean, I definitely had some one-off projects. So for some pretty large companies, but they weren't like massive every time. One was pretty big, some were smaller, and you're just like, okay, this is kind of working, and I'll just keep doing it. But I have a full time job, so it's like, well, worst comes to worst, it's just like some side income, right? Like, so I think that was kind of that current approach. Was like, well, if it takes off, great. If not, at least I'm trying out new things. I'm looking at different technologies. I'm looking at different problem sets and things like that.
So maybe if we could give this a timeline. So like maybe you had like a year where you were working for that other person in the hospital, and then you had like 2, 3 years. I'm not sure how long it was, where you had like a trickle of leads, but it wasn't like consistent enough, and you were still very much experimenting with your marketing.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't really thought through the timeline, right? I think it was kind of a trickle for a while. I think partially because I was writing more for like content that was like how to become a data engineer or like basics of data engineering, and then like before that was like a lot of like data science content as well. That was more intro-y based and basic concepts. I don't think it was until maybe late 2020 or early 2021 that I started maybe changing my content. I'm sure I could go back and look, and really start targeting again. Like I think the first thing I started targeting was like how to set up your data stack, like different tools in your data stack, different layers of your data stack, and really trying to talk more generically about that because I was finding that a lot of people wanted that answered because, I think I looked at the Mad Landscape. That Matt Turk puts out. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like the data landscape he puts out every year. Yeah, the joke of it is right, like is that the logos get smaller and smaller because so many tools exist. And so when I realized, I was like, okay, one of the problems that people have is just picking tools, right? Like for me, it feels simplistic, but like for other people, it's like, well, what's the difference between AWS and Snowflake? I mean, I had people ask that, right? Like, and for us, it's like, well, you're kind of comparing apples to oranges here. Like, what do you want to do? Like, sure, you could kind of compare AWS and Snowflake if you have a very specific set of tools you're looking at from AWS. But if you're just starting with AWS, that's such a broad thing. So I think that was like a realization, and that was again somewhere in either end of 2020, 2021, and I started writing more content there, and then it started really picking up that year. That's like towards by the end of the year, I just got to a point that I was so busy with clients that like, yeah, I eventually had to just focus on consulting, and I eventually left my job at Facebook. it was like a good like 5 years maybe of like more trickle. But again, if you look at all my content back then, it was very like here's the basics of being a data engineer kind of content.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not actually obvious what tool you should use, and you kind of have to like learn about each tool one at a time too. So like, is that something that you did on the back end? I mean, you said it before, like you were kind of like learning about different tools and writing for different people, but because like building up that understanding of the entire landscape is kind of like a huge undertaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that helped. I wrote for tools, honestly, like everything from like front end dev tools. I think there's like a Vue.js article I wrote. So I was learning about that. I was learning about data, like more about data tooling as well. Just using it all. Like I was just getting exposed to it on all these smaller side projects. Go to one client, it'd be BigQuery and Airflow. Go to another client, it'd be Fivetran, DBT, and Snowflake. Another client, it'd be Redshift and something else. And just like diving in and within 3 months having to become like as much of an expert as possible in those tools, right? You're not going to be perfect, but you're like, how can I just figure this all out? And so, yeah, I think just figuring all that out, it really took, just took some time. But like as I did that, yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind
you
of,
kind of
that was
got
all
like
helpful.
a flywheel going, whereas like slow at first, but then all right, you
Yeah.
got your first stack that you learned about, and then it's like all right, you got your first project, you learned about another stack, and you just kept adding, and it kept going and going. So I guess the biggest thing has been your consistency, man. It's been crazy. You've consistently posted for so long, and you've maintained your direction within kind of like data.
Yeah, yeah. I think I often like would make little shifts here and there. I think that's part of life, right? Like you kind of adjust, but I do think like there are people who will one shot things and like they'll just start in a space and then suddenly you'll see them making $3 million a year doing something or whatever they're doing. And some of us just take a little more time, and that's okay, right? Like I like to say it's like you kind of have two choices. You can do nothing and continue wherever you're going, right? If that's where you want to go, that's fine. But yeah, you can do nothing and nothing will change, and then you can't complain because nothing will change. The hard part is if you want something to change, is that you could do something for years and it might not work. And you may, even when you adjust, it might not work. But the truth is, if you want change, you have to do something, right? Like if you want to start a business, you have to go out there and if it's consulting, start putting out content, start talking to people. Maybe nothing happens, and hopefully you're trying to improve as you do it. But like maybe nothing happens for a year or two. But definitely nothing will happen if you do nothing, right? Like it's like nothing will happen if you don't try, and no one's going to give you a consulting business. But I think the challenge is that you could be going at it for 5 years and nothing could happen within that 5 years. So
It sounds like
yeah.
that's rooted in personal experience. I'm curious, are there some things that you did for like 5 years and you realized after 5 years, oh man, this isn't going anywhere. I need to like drop this.
I mean, I think the closest thing I have to that was my career in the culinary world. I was successful. I worked for, like, in Seattle, I worked for several James Beard award-winning restaurants and did that. But I think I realized more in terms of my life, it just wasn't going to go where I wanted it to go. And I think having to give that up and kind of start not all over again, it was kind of like a half start all over again because I'd already done some college. I was 20 at the time because I'd been working about 4 years at that point in the industry from 16 to about 20, and then continued it till I think I was about 21. And then, but at the same time, I had to like kind of let that part of me die to a degree where it was like, well, I put all this effort into it. Like I tried to be really good in this space and actually got really good in this space. But it's not going to be what I want, right? Like it is what I want in terms of it's fun. It's like a very, it's very fulfilling. You do things. It's very like things are very immediate in terms of like when you feel successful. It's immediate almost, right? Like you make a good dish, people are happy. It's immediate response. But on the flip side, like looking at my larger life, I was like, but that's not what I want. I'm not going to make enough money to support a family. I'm not going to see my family. I'm always going to be working Valentine's Day and sometimes, maybe Thanksgiving or Christmas or some certain holidays because people go out on those days and you'll have to likely work some of them. And so a lot of that stuff is where I was like, this isn't for me.
So it's kind of like you wish you could have at 16 started on the data path just from the get-go.
I don't know. I think there are, like it's kind of one of those questions, right? Like people are asking you, like, do you have any regrets, and would you change anything? And it's like, well, I'm here where I am now because of what I did. So it's hard to say, right? Like I'm pretty happy. Maybe I'd be more successful. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would be like I wouldn't have built up the resilience because working in kitchens can be hard and challenging, and maybe I wouldn't have built that up. Maybe that's something that I needed in my life to kind of get a little tougher skin and move and like be willing to kind of grind at things a little harder. So it's hard to say, right? It's like maybe I would have made a ton more money. Maybe if I would have jumped in immediately by the time I was 20, I would have already worked for Facebook and three other big tech companies, and now I'd be the CEO of some multi-million-dollar AI startup. It's so hard to know. That I think it was good.
Yeah, I think it was probably really good. There's, I'm sure there's a lot of value that you got from that, and being able to compare it to what you're doing now is also helpful because you have the awareness as to like what you didn't like about that and what you like about what you're currently doing. I'm curious, I guess, on the topic of AI. I'm sure you deal with a variety of different teams, a lot of different settings. I'm curious as to how you see data teams or these companies incorporating AI. Like, are there any uses that you find particularly like ahead or like really smart?
I mean, I think people are trying to still figure out where it fits. I think that the ways I've often seen people use it well are often when there are more nuanced problems, like if you're implementing a model, adding AI on top of your already existing model to further make it better, right? I think I read about this recently with like a customer experience that someone was writing about where they like went on a phone call and it was clear, like it was kind of clear that it was an AI on the other side, but it was like a much more pleasant experience than what do you call it? Than like your normal like phone tree answers where it's like pick 1, 2, 3, or 4. Like it was a little more human. I do sometimes think that's a kind of a Stockholm syndrome situation where it's like, well, we used to talk to people, and then they're like, that's too expensive, so then they give us phone trees, and now they're like, well, that's not as nice, so now we're getting this AI that's still going to be limited on what it can do and what it can truly think in terms of solutions. So maybe they'll now solve another extra 10% of problems, but there's going to be that 5% that's just going to suck still. But yeah, things like that. So where you can like maybe polish off a little more of those like nuanced problems, so it's not so rigid in terms of your model. I think obviously coding, that's something that I'm currently looking into is like how do you make your flow better? Just like how do you like maybe allow your whole team to have like essentially everyone's like sees like essentially a senior staff level kind of person like review their stuff. Like, hey, I like put out code. How do we get like an AI to like review it in such a way that's even better than some of these AIs that have done it? I saw someone recently do this with Git where they have like Claude review your code. But it's still like, it's kind of simplistic in terms of like what it's looking for. It's cool. It's like a cool idea. It's like another level of testing. Kind of going back to the like you're gonna do your like more rigid test, and then you'll have like Claude come in, but like it'll still miss things. I'll still go through and be like, well, how'd you miss this thing? This is so obvious to me that like I saw this recently where like someone cut out an else statement in a case statement where it's like, okay, well now you're only doing one case statement and there's no else, so everything will be null. I see that and I can logic that out, but like Claude did not. So it's like those things are still missed. But it's a nice idea, and I'm sure it'll get better over time. And then I think the other big thing that I see people is like on the analytics side, a lot of people use it for like getting more ideas of questions, right? Like, well, what questions could I do to better ask and prepare for my presentation that I got to give? Like, are there certain questions that you think the CEO would ask me? What questions would you ask me? Chatbot. And so I think there's a lot of ways you can use it to like help you kind of be that coworker. And that.
Interesting. Yeah. So you have like 3 use cases that you really see.
Yeah. I mean, at least those 3. I'm sure there's more, but yeah, those 3.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really interesting topic. No one knows the answer. But I guess your experience really informs your understanding of the area.
Yeah.
But I guess we're coming up on almost an hour now. So I guess if people want to follow you, or if there's anything that you want people to know about, I think this would be a good time to get into that.
Yeah. I mean, if people want to follow me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I would say Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Substack. You can look up Seattle Data Guy. I'm there. I'm not great at responding to messages. I try my best, but if I can, I'll try. So yeah.
Sweet. Well, it's been really awesome to speak with you. I learned a ton, and I feel like it was really valuable to have this conversation with you. So much
Awesome.
appreciated, man.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much for having it.